Mary Louise, how are you? Oh, you've got to turn your mic on.
There, it's on now. Sorry.
Wonderful. How are things in your area?
Cold and sunny and crisp.
Yes. Well, please introduce yourself properly and tell us where you're telling from, and please tell us a story.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry I came in too late to hear all of your story, but I'm glad they're recorded. I was looking for my little microphone, and I think I got the Indian times mixed up with the Winnipeg times. I'm a bit late. I apologize for that. But the story that I want to tell you today, I guess it's morning for me, but evening for most of you, is a story that's inspired by something that happened to my brother and I when we were young. We lived in Winnipeg, and down the street was the Red River, quite a large, curving, meandering river. And this story happened to us, but it inspired me to think, what if? And I think when you hear the story, you'll see where it starts to veer from what really happened to what if. And I hope you enjoy it. There was once a brother and a sister, and they lived near the banks of the Red River. And they used to play down on the banks of the Red River, even though their mother told them, never go swimming in the Red River. It's too dangerous. And they never did. Children often disobey, and this brother and sister had their share of disobeying, but they never swam in the Red River. They knew it was too dangerous. But they loved to play on the pathways through the river bottom forest. They knew all the places where it curved and where the river undercut its banks, just banks of clay, really, and made little caves just at the edge of the river. Now, one summer, they were down there playing in the river bottom forest when one of those prairie rainstorms came. Some of you might be familiar with a rain that just all of a sudden comes out of the sky in torrents, thick, wet, cold drops of rain, no gentle shower. And they knew that within minutes they'd be soaked, no time to run home. Well, the brother said, well, let's go and just shelter in one of those caves we know about on the banks of the river. This rain will stop pretty soon. And they went and they found one of those overhanging banks that like a cave. And they crawled in there and they watched the raindrops come down onto the river and literally fly back up again. They were so heavy and cold and thick. And they saw the lightning on the water and the thunder, and it was exciting. But after a while, as children do, they got tired of just watching the water on the river, and they began to look around their little shelter. And of course, it was dim in there, but their eyes were now used to the darkness. And they saw a whole world of little creepy crawly spiders and ants and little shells, or rather shellless, I forgot the word for them. Oh, I'll think, not crabs, rats. Oh, I'll think of it. I'm getting old, and so word recall sometimes does that to me. But little creepy crawly things, and tree roots all sticking out. It was just the most amazing place. Well, the brother pulled on one of those roots. Well, it came right out in his hand. And he said to the sister, it's not a root. What is it? And she said to him, it's a bone. A bone. Oh, now they were excited. The river was forgotten. The rain was forgotten. If there's one bone here, there must be more. And they started grabbing and pulling at all of the soil until they had a whole pile of bones at their feet. And well, they didn't know what sort of creature those bones could have come from. They had all sorts of ideas, and they were trying to arrange them, but they really didn't know. And as children sometimes do, they said, oh, let's do some magic and sing a song over these bones. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. And they sang that song, and they got so wrapped up in their magic, they didn't notice at first that the bones started to rearrange themselves into the shape of a creature. It was an old woman with long white hair. And she kind of, she went, oh, it's so good to be back together again. Thank you, children. Oh, well, they weren't afraid. They were just curious. Who are you? I'm just an old woman. I'm so old. I was here when the world began. Oh, well, said the children, what was the world like when it was new? Oh, said the old woman, every element and every creature could speak to each other and understand each other. All the animals, all the humans, they could speak to the rocks and the trees. They could hear the moon and the sun. They could hear the stars in the sky. And in that ancient time, there lived a girl who liked to go to the banks of the river, and she liked to crawl into the caves that the river made on its journey as it meandered. And one summer in the cave, she saw something glimmering and glistening in the dimness of the cave. And when she went over to it and tried to pick it up, it was sheer and as thin as gossamer, but all the colors of the rainbow. That's what it was, a rainbow. Oh, it was so beautiful. Shall I take it home and show my parents? Shall I show it to the rest of the people in my village? No, I'll leave it here for a while. And all that summer, whenever she could, she would come to that little cave and she would gaze on that beautiful rainbow as it lay there in the darkness. Well, summer went and autumn came, and well, out here on the prairies, winters can sometimes be quite mild and sometimes really terribly cold. And that particular winter, it was so cold that, well, people started to get worried that they wouldn't find enough food, or perhaps the winter would last forever. In fact, one day it seemed so cold, it seemed as if the sun stood still in the sky and wasn't moving across like it would every other day. What could they do? And that's when, for some reason, the girl remembered the rainbow. And she ran to the cave and she picked up the rainbow to show to the sun, and she flung it as hard as she could up into the air, and it encircled the sun. Oh, the sun was so entranced by this beautiful rainbow that it was encircling it. It looked to this side and it looked to that side, and it didn't actually look like a rainbow to the people on the earth. But because the sun was only looking to that side and to that side and shone itself on the rainbow, it looked just like 2 points of light on either side of the sun to the people when they were watching. And they said, well, what's that beside the sun? And they called them sundogs. But it was really a rainbow around the sun. Well, the sun was so entranced, as I said before, that it just resumed its work of moving across the sky. And the days came and went, and finally the warm weather came again. And the girl hid the rainbow back in the cave, but now she had a task. On very, very cold winter days, she was to go and get that rainbow and fling it up into the sky where it would help the sun, being so cold, to move itself across the sky. Now, when she had finished telling that story, the children, well, they were entranced. They had forgot where they were, even in a cave at the side of the river with the rain and the thunder and the lightning. It was as if they were in a trance. But they kind of said, "Oh, will you tell us another story? Tell us more, please." And she said, well, I will, but not today. But if you come back on another day and you find this particular cave at the edge of the river, and if you find my bones and put me back together again, I will tell you another story. Well, that was something to look forward to. But she said, will you do something for me now? Yes, what would you like us to do? They said to her. Sing that song for me again. And they did. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. Bones, bones, who are you? Show us who you are. And they sang and they sang. And as they sang, she danced out of the cave. And they followed her and she danced along the banks of the Red River and finally disappeared around a bend in the river. But they believed her. They knew that if they came back and found her bones again and put them together, that she would tell them another story. So I think you can probably tell where that story took off into what if.
It was delightful and mysterious, but tell us, where did it take off from to go into what if?
Well, when the bones became alive and told them stories, we did find bones. They turned out to be cow bones. We took them down to the local museum. We thought we'd be on television for sure, finding dinosaur bones, but they were cow bones. But the museum people were very good to us and asked if we would donate them to the museum. So we were happy enough. But yeah, I had her turn into an old woman who told stories, a bone woman.
Well, I guess the theme of bones and singing to bones and bones coming to life, it's all about the cycle of life and death and rebirth. Is that something?
Yeah. And magic. For instance, I think when I do my session on shamanic elements and stories in a couple of weeks, I think that children still retain that feeling that anything can happen and that there are other worlds, there are other existences, other ways of seeing things. So there's a little bit of that, I suppose, in the story as well.
Yes, as you mentioned, you're kindly leading a workshop on February 18th, Friday, of shamanic elements in folk tales and fairy tales. So shamanic has to do with being able to enter other worlds or call elements of other worlds to this world. Is that Can you put it better than that? Mhm.
Well, a lot of people have tried to say what that is. It's more like a worldview of just what's alive and what isn't, and where does information come from, and who or what wants to help us in our world and our life. And it predates organized religion. It comes from a time when there weren't that many people in the world like there is today, and the world was full of unknowns and covered with forests, and the belief in, well, this is cross-cultural. The belief was that anything could possibly help or hinder you. A tree, or an unseen spirit. So it's just a different worldview, I think. Yeah, I'll go into it more next, in a couple of weeks.
Here in Asia, and specifically South India, the shamanism is very much still alive,
Yes,
behind closed doors.
behind closed
People will
doors. Yeah.
say we're Christian, we're this, we're that, but there's a lot of, the term here is Sami activity.
Yes.
And
Something. Okay.
Sami, and it is an essential aspect of worship and the divine here, but it's sort of invisible. I mean,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
announced. It's not done for outsiders.
No, this is true. Probably the same everywhere. I have a friend who journeyed to Siberia because she could speak Russian. And I'm going to tell one of her stories in a couple of weeks. And that's what she found, that some of the small Soviet socialist republics, when they were that, did have that type of healing person working alongside their Western trained doctors, but they didn't really make a big thing of it because they didn't want it to be stamped out. And it does linger in our stories. I think our memory is so ancient, as Jung has pointed out, that it still is there. I agree with you. Even those of us who perhaps don't even practice the shamanic practices. And yeah, it is definitely alive, but organized religions have not welcomed it, let's say.
Of course.
Yeah. There's even power struggles among ancient shamans. But I just think the worldview has something to offer us today, in today's world. That's why I was going to talk about it later. Yeah.
I loved your story. I loved the imagination of the child and the knowing of, the will to go to the river, and the being unafraid, seeing the bones and not being afraid, and being, the idea of the fascination, and wanting to know more, and then just believing. And it was just really restorative to me. And I just want to thank you. I loved the way you told it. I loved this song and your beautiful voice all the way through. And I just want to thank you. It was a real restorative story in the nature of play and will and autonomy and believing in following one's own path wherever it leads, no matter what adults tell us about don't do this and don't do that, and just kind of trusting one's own intuitive knowing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for those kind words. And I think you pointed out what I think a lot of us, storytellers, we often go, oh, is anybody going to like this story? Or, well, should I tell that story? And we think, what story shall I choose? And sometimes, even I do, I forget that a person listening, you're going to get whatever you need from it, and every story has so many layers that sometimes when the storyteller can't even voice them all. They're there though, aren't they? Yeah. So thank you you put that so nicely. Yeah. It's a good thing for all of us to remember.
Yes, as Heidi said, each one of us have our own takeaways from the story. Mary loved the way you said it. I could literally see the water, the river, the path, the small little mounds of clay. Very adventurous and very, very visual. Loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Mary, I love that story. I'm imagining that in your life, I mean, tell me if I'm along the right lines, but I imagine you've been back to that cave many times with your brother, or maybe just you, and pulled out those bones if you've managed to find them, and more stories have been shared by the wise old woman. Am I imagining along what happens to you?
No. She is a little bit of what's the word? A muse. Yes, absolutely. It was quite a wonderful feeling when I was in a story. I was rehearsing with another storyteller. Well, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And it popped up, this whole idea of the bone woman. And it was a great feeling to, oh, what a great idea. What can I do with that? And yes, definitely. Yeah.
Mary Louise, I have a feeling you're a religion professor or a daughter of religion professors. Is this correct?
No, my father was a doctor.
But somehow you have a very strong, even academic background in thought about all of this.
Yeah. Well, the spiritual side of life is just almost more important, or just as important as our temporal life. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people maybe don't get the opportunity to talk about it or explore it. But I think a lot of us, a lot of people have that spiritual side.
Mm-hmm. All right.
By any other name, right? I just wanted to thank you for your story. First of all, I loved how the bones were resurrected through the song of the children. Loved that. And then you had the stories that were connecting the generations. And you know they were going to bring her back and listen to more stories. I absolutely love that. I also wanted to make one other comment. You were, for me, so correct. The right story will come if, as you said, we take the time to listen to ourselves, to believe in ourselves. It's like, which one should we do? I don't know. It seems like this. But if we just take that moment, the right one will come for the right time and the right listeners. And our listeners will get what they need out of it. So I just wanted to say thank you. It was fabulous.
Oh, and I suppose you've had this experience, and many of you have, where you think you're going to tell a certain story and you get there and you look around at everybody and somebody makes a comment, or you hear the story before and you, oh, I'm not telling that story after all. I have to tell this one. And I didn't even plan to. Yeah. But it's like you say, because you're aware of your surroundings, and yeah, you're letting yourself be guided by that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very, very much.